This is the concierge, sir.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Concierge Confidential. I'm your host, Brian Ortega, and in today's episode, we will be talking about how do comps actually work. So you've probably heard this term thrown around in Vegas a lot is, they comp me this, they comp me that. Oh, like maybe I'll get some comps. What does it actually mean? And how do you actually obtain them? So there's actually like a very mathematical process that goes into this and how we figure it out. But I'm going to give you sort of the straightforward answer on really who gets them, what is the best way to attain comps, and really is it worth, getting a player's card, and does it actually work? What happened to the good old days of, I know a guy? Well, that works, but for certain people, obviously. So we'll be diving into that for this episode. Hopefully it's, enjoyable, and we'll jump into that coming up next. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive right into it. No news, obviously. Big weekend coming up, though, May 1st. The beginning of May, like the first weekend, is always a huge weekend to come to Vegas. It's always the most expensive, but there's also like the most events going on. There's usually a big boxing match. There's usually big concerts in town. There's one at Legion Stadium. I forgot the name of the artist who's performing there. Sorry, he's a country guy. Oh my goodness, my brother loves this guy too. Sorry guys, forgot about it. But jumping into the episode, so comps. So this came up at like one of my jobs, my job that at Fountain Blue. So I was working at in our high-end clientele part of the hotel, and they get certain number of things, like, for example, transportation to and from the airport, sometimes transportation anywhere they want to go. And a lot of this stuff is comped through the casino host office. And it got me thinking is like, comps are a very interesting thing because everybody has heard about them, like getting, free entry to the buffet. They'll maybe get a free dinner. They might get free rooms. And how does this happen? So it is interesting to sort of talk about because back in the day, say like the 1950s and 60s, it was always something, it was very cheap, and it was also something that like you knew a guy and he gets you a hotel room. If you knew the owner of the hotel or a GM, they'd maybe comp you a steak dinner, and that's cool. But the thing is that a lot of people haven't transferred that into the modern era. You have to remember back in the 50s all the way up until about the 70s, if we had a computer system, it was extremely, extremely basic. And it was really just a way to keep records for things. And there was more like room reservations and that kind of thing that would possibly go quickly, but to make things help out a little bit quicker. But actually, it's like storing data, we didn't have that. They didn't have, the amounts of servers that we have now at our properties that store a lot of information. Obviously, this becomes a problem when they have, ransomware attacks, which as a hotel employee, we are drilled over and over and over again on how these actually work and how to avoid that happening. But kind of diving into it, so in the modern era, the way that you obtain comps is by your play, and a lot of places now is by just how much you spend at the hotels as well as the restaurants and bars. So back in the day, I would say back into what our current system is like with the players clubs, is that you used to have a players club card to track your play, and you would really only get comped if you were gambling. So basically, you were gambling on table games, slots. That was the best way to obtain points. Nowadays, especially places like MGM Grand, Caesars, obviously, and all the other ones, which we'll explain in a second, you also get rewarded now on your room stay because the rooms have gotten much more expensive than what they used to be. So you obviously should get points for that, especially if your room is, let's just say, $200 a night. You're staying 2 nights, that's $400. And then you add up all the resort fees, so it's another $100. So really you're saying it's like $500 a night. That's a lot of tier credits and points that you can get from just staying at the hotel. Same thing that goes to your food and drink, especially because those have gotten more expensive. And it's not it's not an accident that we started doing this, because we started to see, as many of you have understood from listening to podcasts like these, is many people do not gamble like they used to. So this is an incentive to create a loyalty membership, even if you don't play. It actually entices people who just want to come visit Las Vegas and come stay to experience all the restaurants, the nightlife, the dinners, all that good stuff. And if you gamble as well, that's icing on top of the cake. Essentially, why you should sign up for loyalty programs, especially in Las Vegas, is because unlike in the 1950s where you knew a guy, the knowing a guy is now having a player's card. Essentially, every time that we look up a guest, we'll look up their room number. And for where I work at in Fleur-de-Lis every once in a while, it is important to know your room numbers, because it actually does matter on the things you can get inside of a hotel much quicker than us saying, well, let me call your host, because we have it all laid out. We understand sort of what you're getting with your room stay, and we're able to do things much quicker. So when we look and we see that you are a top tier player, that opens doors for you, obviously. That is your I know a guy. Because you have to remember, back in the 1950s and 60s, when we used to have like this I know a guy thing, we had maybe 200 hotel rooms, and at the very most for some of our resorts. So it was much easier to sort of say, yeah, I know Johnny at the front desk. Nowadays, our hotel rooms, for example, Fontainebleau, I believe we have about 3,400 hotel rooms, so 3,400 hotel rooms. So you times that by 2 if everybody's staying as a couple, that's over 6,000 people that are staying in our hotels. So, and that's just counting the people that are staying at our hotels, not even the people who are just visiting and walk through traffic. So it's impossible for us to track everybody and know exactly every single person. But unless you do. Like, for example, this is a great example. So everybody knows who listens to the pod, I go to Delilah's a lot, and I actually do know the bartenders, the hostesses, the cocktail waitresses. I do know some of the managers as well. I know the manager when I go. It's kind of funny because we have very similar names. And we know each other's faces. So that is an actual personal relationship, just like any other industry where when you know somebody, you know somebody. That's your relationship. That's your contact. That's networking. That's the whole thing. It's very hard to do that when you're on vacation, especially when you only come to Vegas. Let's just say maybe 2-3 times a year. You can't build the relationship that somebody who lives here and can come here 365 days a year to be able to create that relationship. So what is your relationship to your hotel? It really is your player's card. Your player's card tells us everything we need to know. It tells us how much you spend when you come to the hotel, how frequently you come to the hotel, what games you play, and any other information that may be attached to that card. So that's why it is imperative to have a player's card. They're becoming more and more important, especially if you are coming to Vegas recently. You've obviously heard about like Vegas is dead from 2025. And now Vegas has really upped their game on giving more promotions, giving you reasons to come to Vegas. We have all-inclusive deals. And the only way that you're able to get some of these promotions that aren't all-inclusive, where you actually just physically have to go and book it yourself, you have to be signed up for these programs from the start. And that is how you get like emails and all this stuff about promotions coming to Vegas. And that's one way of getting it. And not everybody has to be a super high roller. So, for example, my mom, who loves to play slots, she actually gets quite a bit of comps from MGM Resorts. Almost every month, she'll get a comp to come to Vegas and stay a lot of places for free, or sometimes at a super duper discount. And I don't use my players cards enough, but my mom, whenever she actually goes and actually has to, play any slot machine, she is not playing the machine unless she can put her players card in it. And I used to think this was silly, but really, it really does pay off, especially if you do it enough, especially for slot machines. Slot machines are probably the best way to earn comps and promotions than any other game in the casino if you are just an average amateur player, because it will track to the number how much money you put in the machine. It also gets multipliers if you play slots, which is also quite nice, that you don't get when you play table games. With table games, the process of getting like a rating, like how much you spend per hour, and then they do all this math to figure out what's your theoretical loss and what your actual loss is. It's a whole deal. They have to have an actual person look and see how much you're playing, and then they'll put it into the computer for you. So you might be playing $20 a hand or $25 a hand, but let's just say the pit boss walked up, and then you've been playing, $15 a hand, up and back and forth. They'll average it out probably closer to 15 than it is 25. So it's really one of those things where slot machines people look down on, but that's one of the best ways to gain comps in Las Vegas. So what is a comp? So what is the form of a comp? Nowadays, essentially what it is you can get discounts on rooms, free rooms sometimes. You can also get usually promotions in free play. That's another big one. It's very rare that you get free dinners. So let's just kind of start this off from the beginning, is that comps at the normal level, like where you're just a regular standard citizen, you're not a celebrity, you're not like a VIP of a certain nature, you're just a regular guest that comes in very frequently and you want to use your comps. We don't usually give you free dinners. If you're wondering why that doesn't happen very often, there's a couple reasons. One, it's hard to just say, have a free dinner on us. So, and also the reason is that back in the day, hotels used to own the restaurants inside of their properties, which they don't do anymore. It was much easier to comp something when you were actually absorbing all of the hit, because then you can sort of figure it out. The thing is, and I found this out, thank goodness, from the years of taking hospitality classes, is that one of the major loss leaders for a hotel is food and beverage. Because food and beverage used to give that away for free so they would gamble more in the casino. So the way the accounting works is that you essentially would give out certain number of comps in food and beverage, and you basically pay yourself. So you're saying, let's just say you went out and they had a $200 dinner. What it would end up is that bill would go to you as the hotel. The hotel would pay the $200 dinner, and then you think all is fine. Well, there is a hidden cost, essentially, for most people, that goes to the restaurant. The restaurant does still have to charge for that $200 meal and all the ingredients that went into it. So it actually will operate more of a loss than it is a gain. How do you counterbalance that? It's theoretical that guest, instead of spending, will now spend $600 or $400 in the casino to counterbalance what you have to pay the food and beverage for having to buy those ingredients, because obviously that's a physical tax, or physical pay, because you have to pay the vendors. So I know it gets like, that was the simplest way that I can put it. I'm also not great at math. I think we've also figured this out, but it is a very simple way of like how accounting works for hotels. Like, how can you lose money if it was all kind of like in the same system? It's really weird. Like, it is not free. Somebody does have to pay for it, and then somebody, charges it out. So it is very interesting the way that works. So that is why many hotels don't just do free dinners anymore, because they do have to account for that when it comes to, taxes and all that other stuff, and, EBITDA and all the things at the end of the year. So very interesting to learn about that. So what we do now instead, we will give out credit. So we'll do like food and beverage credit. We'll do resort credit. A lot of times food and beverage credit is the one that you don't want. You want resort credit if it's possible, because resort credit can be put towards your room. Food and beverage credit sometimes is limited to certain outlets. So it's really important when you are getting comps and reading these things that resort credit is much better than food and beverage credit. Food and beverage credit a lot of times is limited to certain restaurants. Another really popular one that happens at Fontainebleau is you get a breakfast credit that you can only use, I believe, at like 3 different restaurants out of like our 7 or 8 restaurants. So you do have to be careful with some of those promotions. But if you can get like $50 per day food and beverage credit, that's usually the way to go. And how do you get those? So those are usually given out in the form of promotional emails that are sent out, monthly, bi-monthly, weekly to your email. How do you get those? You sign up for the player's card. So that is how you get your promotions to come into the hotel. So a lot of times you still have to pay. You will get like a discounted rate that has a discount code. Those still count not so much as comps, but as promotions. Comps would be something, for example, like my mom gets, is you do get free rooms for certain properties. So this happens a lot during like the Super Bowl when my mom comes to Vegas, and then she'll always ask me, she's like, well, these are the hotels that I have options at MGM Resorts. And then one hotel will be free. The other hotel will have like a discounted price. For example, when the Super Bowl was in Las Vegas, my mom actually had free rooms at New York, and all she had to pay was the resort fee. Or she could have stayed at the Bellagio for like $150 instead. I think a lot of people understand that free is for me, or free for most people, honestly. So she booked New York. But you are able to kind of go through that, especially if you sign up for the Players Program, and that's the comps you can get before you come to Las Vegas. So what are the people that get comps in like anytime they want? So it's a very good question. So like, how do you get free rooms how you want them, not by like promotions like my mom gets where it's like you have to pick this one or that one. So a really good point to be made here is that you have two of kind of like the big dogs in town. You have MGM Resorts and Caesars Entertainment. They do offer a lot more chances to build up points and build up tier credits because they have a lot more properties. And they're also nation and worldwide. For example, Caesars Entertainment owns basically whatever Harrah's used to be, is now called Caesars Entertainment. They have a lot of regional properties around the United States. They have places in Canada, and it is all interconnected. So you can be living in, let's use MGM for example. You can be living in places like Detroit and go to MGM Detroit, or National Harbor, which is in Maryland, outside the DC area. And if you live there, you do not have to pay to stay in a hotel. You can just go there on a weekend. And if you do that enough times, you do accrue points, and then you can use that towards your trips to Las Vegas. The only problem is that places like that, like MGM Resorts, is that your tier credits don't always transfer evenly to different properties. So for example, if you are like a super high level in Detroit, in let's just say National Harbor in Washington, D.C., you might get a certain level of room there that you actually don't get in Las Vegas because their tier system is slightly different, and also like their barrier for certain things. So let's just say you have to have, let's say, 35,000 points in Maryland, and you get like the penthouse suite for comp for like the weekend. Well, when you come to Vegas, if you have 35,000 credits, let's just say the exact same, you don't get the exact same treatment. You would probably get something in the mid to higher tier level, maybe at a discounted rate, maybe blacked out weekends. It really depends. So it doesn't always transfer, but it does give you the opportunity to gain more points if you have players cards for something regional. Same thing with Caesars, same situation. Another good thing to remember is that places like you have to always remember MGM and Caesars are quite established. Like, they are established brands, obviously. Same thing with Wynn. And Wynn is an established brand for a luxury client. So their barrier of entry is much higher, obviously. These are all free cards, of course, but the barrier of entry of getting comps is going to be much higher because they have a lot more players that are gambling at a higher level. Same thing with MGM. It's just the quantity. They have so many members, and they also have, because they have so many members, they also have a lot of top tier members as well. Same thing with Caesars. So how do you become a big fish in certain ponds? Well, you have to fish in the right ponds. So what does that mean? So, for example, if you are somebody who frequents Las Vegas and you want to be, at a high level at a certain property, you don't want to get lost in the shuffle, as they say. You want to go to places that are more independent, that are just starting up, because they're definitely going to offer you more promotions to entice you to keep coming back to Las Vegas. So what does that mean? I'm talking places like Resorts World, Fontainebleau, Circa, those type of options. Why? Because they only have a limited number of properties. They are all trying to grab the people who are not at the Wynn, MGM, or Caesars, and they're trying to grab those people as well. But this was like sort of my idea when when Fontainebleau first opened. I told myself, I want to be known at this property. Like, I want people to know me at this place. Like, MGM, Caesars, they may not know me because there's so many of them. But if I get in early and sort of build like my rep, if you will, my player's card, at this property, I can be somebody at this property. And I would say to an extent that actually worked. It worked for a lot of locals because you got lots of local promotions. They also have a really good promotional programs where you can stay for free. You'll get food and beverage credit, all that good stuff. So, and it's pretty frequent. So you get free parking, all that good stuff. So that is one way of doing it, is you search for the right properties to try to be a big fish at. You could be a big fish at one pond instead of a big fish at many other ponds, because it's much harder to do that because there are so many of them. There's so much more big fish, obviously. So hopefully that was a good explanation of like where to like look for. So I would recommend, if you're just starting out, is whenever you come to Vegas, go to go to certain properties and get players cards. Also, this will help you learn, what's owned by what, because you do have to have multiple cards. I think my mom has at least 10 different cards. She even has cards for hotels that aren't even here anymore. So the thing is you only have to have like really 5 cards. You have MGM, Caesars, the Wynn, Venetian, Fontainebleau, Resorts World, and then if you want, you can get one for Treasure Island. That's 7 cards. And if you go downtown, you can get the one for Circa. That's 8. And then you can also get one for any of the other properties downtown, like the Golden Nugget, local casinos like Station, and then South Point. That's 11 cards. So it can build up. It is a lot to have 11 different players cards, but guess what? All locals have them because that's the best way to track your play. So at what level do you start getting free stuff? So this is essentially going to be a really hard thing to swallow, but let's use the property that I'm at, for example. And again, these are pretty big numbers, but and again, this isn't like locked in. These are more just sort of off of like general knowledge of how much you'd have to play. So to get like a standard free room, in Vegas, I would say you have to spend, let's just go in a year. You would have to spend close to $5,000 to $10,000 to get free rooms at Fontainebleau. And again, these depend on the property. I'm just using this one as an example. So yeah, I would say you have to spend about $5,000 to $10,000 a year to get standard free rooms at the Fontainebleau. And again, it's because it's a newer property and we're trying to gain the trust of those players. That is a good chunk. That is a good amount of money. And even like once we get to like the closer to like the $10,000 range, like you might start getting fleur-de-lis suites, which is actually quite nice. And again, it depends on the weekend. There might be blackout dates, and then you might have to pay like a certain amount for that. A lot of times, this happens very frequently, is that you will not get your rooms comped until after your stay. So this is very common nowadays, is that they will say, okay, we will comp your room, but you have to spend a certain amount of money in the casino before we can comp that room. So, or comp things on your trip. So how does that work? So essentially they'll say this is going to be the price for the hotel room. You do not have to pay in advance, but you do have to have a credit card down on file. And then at that point, they will say, got to hit the tables. I've actually seen it happen. And if you don't hit like the spending minimum that you have arranged with a casino host, then they will charge you for certain aspects of your stay. This also happened a lot with show tickets. So like a host would get free show tickets for a guest from their casino block, and they would tell them, okay, make sure you play this weekend, make sure you do this, make sure you do that. And if they didn't spend enough money, they would charge them for the show tickets. So that was always very interesting. So what happened was, this is a good story, is that I was standing at the concierge desk and there was a host who was getting transportation or tickets for a guest. And actually, I think the guest was actually in front of me. And I was reading his phone because I'm nosy. And I was looking for tickets for the Aviators game. And I was reading on the text message that said, just that's like, we can do transportation. That's fine. Just make sure you try to hit the tables tonight. And it's very interesting because you're kind of like a coach at that point. Like, as a casino host, it's like, we need you out there. We need you to play. And again, sometimes they win, sometimes they lose. They don't have to lose. They could win. That's definitely possible, but we're definitely banking on the fact that they're going to lose money. So usually I would say to get free rooms in in Vegas, or at like Fontainebleau, for example, $5,000 to $10,000 is kind of what we're looking for to get like free rooms outright, no problem. How do you get like nice rooms? So when you start getting more free stuff is when you start spending more money in the casino. So let's just say, for example, like you're eating at a restaurant that is like Don's Prime or Poppy Steak, and there's 8 people. You guys spend, let's just say, $1,200, 8 people. That would not be, that'd actually be pretty not bad. But let's just say you spend $1,000 for dinner, $1,000. For every $1,000, and let's just say that you're going to get it comped. You're going to get it comped. Like, you're going to get it, done at the end of the stay. How does that work, by the way? People always ask that too. Is like, do you just like walk up and have, just say, hey, like comp it? You definitely need a comp number, which is a way that we're able to basically bill back to the casino. It goes to an account, and then they sort of like all work it out. It kind of goes into this big giant pile, if you want to visualize it. So most hotels, especially in Vegas, have these big giant house accounts. So this is a way for us to track what is charged to the hotel and then figure out how to divvy it up. And then we figure out sort of a budget for that. So a really good way of thinking about this is that, let's just use the casino host, for example. Let's just say they get, let's just say $1 million. Let's just say $1 million a month to comp, which that's actually probably quite a bit. That's probably an outrageous number. So you add $1 million to comp. They are expecting that in that month that they make at least, and this would be minuscule, they make at least $3 to $5 million from their casino guests, specifically, because that's how we can track what goes to what. So if they can make $6 million and then comp out anything less than $1 million, that's great. We don't want to actually comp the entire $1 million because we want to keep as much profit as possible. But they do understand that in terms of guest acquisition is that they have to you got to spend money to make money is sort of like the idea that you want to go in with. So it is very interesting. And again, I'm using very abstract numbers. These are not exact numbers, but they need a decent rate on return for what they are spending for that guest. And again, that's for everything. So like what goes into like the master account? It would be like food and beverage is obviously the most expensive thing that we rooms. Rooms would be the most expensive. But actually, in terms of like physical things, it would really be like food and beverage because those are things that have to be replaced. They aren't just like sitting there. For example, like when a fleur-de-lis room or a skyloft room is not being used, it is just sitting there. It is not actually costing us anything for it to sit there. We obviously have to pay housekeeping and the staff that goes in there and arranges it. But that's only like one time in, a certain amount of days. So it is literally just sitting there. So if we can comp that out to somebody who's going to spend, let's just say on a weekend, is going to spend $10,000 or $15,000 for that weekend specifically, that's basically the casino making money giving a place to stay for the person who's going to be actually spending that amount of money. So essentially it turns into a $15,000 room or more. People do spend a lot more money than just 10 or 15,000 in a weekend. And yeah, and then all you really have to spend is for the housekeeping for that room. Obviously the staff that has to support that room. Just so everybody kind of understands sort of how these rooms work, is that like Skylofts, Fleur de Lis, any like luxury hotel space, because it's always like given like, oh, like you just have to pay the housekeeper. A lot of people have to support rooms like that. So you have obviously the butler that usually goes into the room and supports that room. Then you have the housekeeping staff, which could be multiple people. There are multiple butlers as well that support a floor. Then you also have the butler coordinators, which are in the back. You also have, runners and that kind of thing, management staff. They all have to support those rooms. So that goes into sort of the price of having to be there. It's also a 24-hour operation, those suites, like Skylofts, like the Tower Suites, the Sky Villas. They need people there to support them. But usually what happens is that if you're spending enough money, we're there to support you. And how does it work? So how do you get free stuff? So like how does it work getting the free stuff is essentially what it is. So I saw something on a Reddit post is that they're like, why would you charge it back to the room? That makes no sense. It's so stupid. Why? I just call my guy and he comps it for me and I go to the buffet and I use the ticket. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's not 1996 anymore. Like there are ways to do this. And the most efficient way to do this is to charge things back to your room. Everything goes into like an account. And then what'll happen is that before you check out, this will go to your casino host. And if you spent enough money, there's a certain threshold that you have to hit. And as long as, and they'll look at what you spent, they will comp the entire thing. And again, that's like arbitrary, like the entire thing, but they will typically have it set out that we will comp up to this amount. So it'll also say on the hotel room, that'll say we will comp this amount of money. And again, it changes depending on your status and level. If you're a regular person who gambles a lot, like you're, not a professional gambler, but you're a high net worth individual, your minimum that you have to hit, is a certain number. And then the comp number might go up. It might be very large in relation to how much you spend. If you're somebody who comes on, a vacation to Las Vegas and you gamble quite a bit, let's just say you gamble $500,000, $500,000, you'll probably get a pretty high comp number. You'll probably get anything up to, let's just say, I don't know, $10,000 in comps. Do we think you're going to spend that much money? No. Is it possible? 1,000%. We have, bottles in our suites that are, quite high. Bottles of wine can be very expensive at many restaurants. But yes, it is all relative in terms of how much you spend, and then how much you're known. And that's for a normal person. And that has to do with relationships, loyalty. They do lots of background checks when you get like credit, which is a totally different situation, which we're going to talk about today. But there are certain numbers that you can get comped up to. And that's once you get to high net worth individuals. Yeah, that's where casino hosts come in. So casino hosts are really there to bring in the big fish. There's actually a great book. It's called Whale Hunt in the Desert, which made me want to become a casino host, which is like really cool. I think it's really cool because it just seems like a cool job. I have to say, when you actually talk to casino hosts are interesting people. They are quite pushy. They're usually great salespeople. A lot of them come from business backgrounds, MBAs. They typically don't have a huge background in hospitality. A lot of times they're actually more from the business side of the world. And again, they're very short, they're very direct and very to the point. Some may call them mean, but it does take a type of person to deal with them. You have to know sort of like where they're going and what they want. They're big on anticipation. So casino hosts can be very, very interesting people to talk to. And I would say, because I would love to be one, I tend to deal with them better and have a better knowledge of like what makes them that way. I do think that a lot of my colleagues have trouble with casino hosts because they'll just say, "Oh, they're mean." And the thing is that I think coming from like when I was a producer and when I would need things done, I was usually very sharp to the point, and I'm a pretty nice person. So I was pretty straightforward. Like I need this and this and this, and like your brain has all these things they have to take care of. So I think that's where casino hosts come into that. And casino hosts are really the point of contact for any big gamblers. So they're the ones that okay anything that's sort of questionable. A lot of times we'll have somebody who only gets rides to and from the airport. They don't get rides to other, other locations like other hotels. So they have to pay for those. But let's just say they want to go somewhere and they're not authorized to get a free car. The casino host is usually the first person we call to say, is this okay for this guest to get a comped car or a certain type of car? And they will say yes or no. And it's really their job it's one of their jobs is to authorize those things, because then we will charge them. That is essentially what that goes into. So it's very interesting. So that's how it goes. So how do you get said free car? That's a very good way of looking at it. So a couple different ways. You can arrange it with the casino host, and this is a negotiation, essentially. You learned about this in Whale Hunt in the Desert. Another name drop for that book is that you will talk with your host, and there's a certain amount of money that you will spend. And let's just say we're tracking it. We'll say, hey, like this person's at this point. So let's just say that number is you have to spend, let's just say on one trip. Let's just say you're here for one trip. So on one trip, you have to spend, $8,000. So $8,000. So that's what you're trying to hit. And if we see that you are approaching that number or you've hit that number, then you will probably get a free room. A free car. A car that can take you to different locations. And that's not a problem because you weren't able to do that before. So that is something that you would have to talk to your casino host with. They would confer with us, and then we kind of go from there. Some people have this arranged beforehand. If you're staying in certain suites, for example, the Fleur de Lis suites or Skylofts or the Mansion, you typically will get a free car if you are a casino invited guest. That's usually what happens. So if you are a casino invited guest staying in a Skyloft or you're staying in a Fleur de Lis suite, you will get free transportation your entire stay. We do say try not to abuse that because some people definitely do. That's up to you to decide whether that's abusive or not. But let's just say hey, we're going to dinner at the Wynn, or you're going to dinner at the Aria and you want to ride. That's what it's for. And then you want to ride back. That's what it's for. But we've had people who say, hey, I want a ride for me. I want a ride for my grandma who's actually not staying in the suites that I'm staying in. They're staying in a below suite. That is not included. And then you also want to make multiple stops along the strip and then finish at the hotel. That's abusing the car situation because there's a limited number of cars. Because most of the time people are using cars to get to and from the airport, and then every once in a while go to dinner. And when you start abusing it, that's really throwing off what's available for when people need things right away. So usually to get a free car, you got to spend, a good amount on a trip, or you have an existing relationship, and that's how you get free things. How do you get those relationships? You gamble a lot. You be a high net worth individual, like a vice president, or for a company, a YouTuber. That would be counts as a celebrity. Or you just know a guy. That's always good. You actually do know a guy. Because that still work. I know a bunch of concierge managers. I know a bunch of bartenders, and relative to what it is, that's what you get. So yeah, free cars. That's cool. Also, comp stuff usually pertains to stuff in your room. So for example, flowers, amenities, in-room dining, that stuff is all really easy to comp. That is actually where you can get comp dinners. If you end up going to off-property, this is another thing. This is why people like having MGM and Caesars rewards programs, is that it is much easier to go to other properties and still get comps and still get free dinners, get free drinks, because they have so many more properties to choose from. Let's just say you are staying at MGM Grand, but you end up going to the Bellagio at Mayfair Supper Club because that's where you want to eat dinner, and you're a big player, and it's not a problem. You just charge it back to your room at MGM. They charge it, bing, bang, boom, it's comped. If you are staying at some place like Fontainebleau that only has one property in Las Vegas, and then you end up wanting to go to like the Wynn, which is a very common sort of like connection, it takes a lot more doing to get like a comp dinner there. It does happen. We have what's called billbacks, where they would bill the casino account or bill the casino credit card for example, a casino host, and then they sort of work it out. It's like an invoice essentially, and that's how you would get your money back. So a lot of times when guests are very cognizant of getting free things, they will stay at your property. That's sort of the way that it works. It's sort of the incentive of staying on property is it's a much easier process to get something comped, which is why Caesars and MGM have the upper leg sometimes, because they have so many properties to choose from. You have much more options to choose in the city. Just keep that in mind. So, have I covered everything? I think I've covered a lot in terms of comps. Celebrities, so like celebrities and like friends of like owners is a big thing. Celebrities tend to get lots of comp things just for being a celebrity, especially if they're like staying at the hotel and performing at the hotel. It's also very interesting is that like those aren't always like a given. It just always kind of depends on the person. They usually, especially if they're in town for like an event, like if they're here for the Super Bowl or like an all-star game, and they're being paid to be here, essentially, their production company will pay for it, and then they're responsible for anything that comes with it. And they have this worked out on their end of how they want to deal with comps. So, yeah, it's really interesting because like celebrities do pay for things. Like they usually will get. Usually what'll happen is like they'll get a comp room and then they have to pay for everything else. But usually what'll happen is, because if they're not a big gambler, for example, they will coordinate with like an entertainment team or like a sales team or leisure team is sometimes what they're called. They will arrange that guest being here, and they're sort of like the point person, and they will charge things back to their room, and depending on what the salesperson has told them, they'll say, okay, well, we'll take care of it. Like, we'll take care of it for, you staying here. So it's very interesting. It's just like celebrities, it's a very interesting thing to sort of talk about, because I can't tell you like who's staying at the hotel. But we do have celebrities stay at our property because it's a luxury property. Same thing as like Aria or Bellagio, Skylofts, celebrities tend to stay there. The mansion, they do get lots of people who stay there, but they're usually like royalty. It's very interesting. Like I think Obama stayed at the mansion, and then like the King of Brunei stayed at the mansion. Like the King of Saudi Arabia also stayed at the mansion. When I did tours of the mansion, that was always fun because like the general manager from the mansion was sick. He's this old Italian guy who definitely like saw somebody get killed back in the day. So I thought his stories were awesome. But yeah, I think I've talked enough about comps. Hopefully that was helpful. I know I did a lot of talking there, so hopefully you guys liked some of it. But really, to get like free stuff, it is very hard to do. You have to spend an absorbent amount of money. We're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. If you come to Vegas and say, hey, I spent $500, I want something for free, or $1,000, I want something for free, probably not going to happen. You have to spend like in a trip, oh my God, did I say earlier, like 5,000 to 10,000? Yeah, like I would say like 10,000 to get like promotional stuff, like to get really good promotional stuff. I would say on a trip, you'd probably have to spend, 5,000 to 10,000 a trip if you're starting to get free things on like singular trips. But it takes a long time, to get a lot of promotional, things. So yeah, I would say a trip, you have to spend at least 10 grand or more to start getting like free upcoming rooms essentially at that point. So it is what it is. So with that being said, thanks so much for listening to the episode. Hopefully it was helpful. I always recommend, go get a player's card. That's probably the number one way to start getting comps, because if we don't know how much you're playing, then we don't know, if you're anybody that we have to deal with. So with that being said, thank you so much, everybody. Really appreciate it. We're going to go see Devil Wears Prada this weekend. Go out and see it. Pump up those numbers. Got to pump those numbers up. And Mom's going to be visiting, so we're going to be doing some fun stuff. And if you see me on town, come up and say hello. But remember, keep it confidential.